Alright, we're finally back with a brand new video for y'all. Who's calling me right now?
Is it the shitter himself?
You called me! I'll explain what's going on. I finally got some free time to make a new video for y'all. I know the last video I made was the Spanish Christmas SCP multiplayer video. That fucking name. So initially I was going to do a video on the Trials of Fate and the Infinite Portal that came out with the Warhammer 3 update. But I ran into some technical issues that resulted in that video being delayed. So it is going to come out, but it's going to come out later. In the meantime, we're just going to go ahead and do a video on Age of Empires 3. It's a really good game that I enjoyed playing. Consider this less a review and more of a stream of incoherent thoughts meant to entertain. With that out of the way, we can just start with the general introduction. It initially came out in 2005, but for the Definitive Edition, that came out in 2020. With that in mind, there's been a lot more modern sensibilities added to the game, like a disclaimer talking about the Native Americans' representation in the medium, and also DLC has been added for this definitive edition of this game. Going back to the Native American side, there's a lot more research you can do on the topic from really well-researched sources. So if you're interested, just do that. The history is honestly kind of wild. What the heck? With that in mind, be sure to show respect in the same way our ancestors did. Alright, so since we've talked about that, I can go and dive into the story mode. I'm just going to be talking about Blood, Ice, and Steel. If you don't want spoilers, just skip to here. So I'm going to go ahead and summarize the story in the worst way possible. So the main character you follow is Morgan Black, a knight in an order. You start the game by being besieged by Ottomans, so you just fight them off as part of the first mission. So from there, you learn some wacky stuff from some cave writings. I'll just let the scene play.
The writing refers to the Lake of the Moon, a place known only to the Aztecs. America sive nobi orbis.
With this information, Morgan is now charged with finding the Lake of the Moon, because in the story it's hinted at that it's actually the Fountain of Youth. This is supported later in the story, but we'll get there when we get there. There's also a mentioning of the Circle of Ossus, which is like the colonial Illuminati. They're the main antagonists for the whole story. We'll try and rapid fire through the rest of the story beats, just to get to the good parts. So in Act 1, Lizzie is this pirate that's the antagonist to Morgan for the first half. In the second half of Act 1, she then becomes like his Uber driver.
Prove yourself worthy to sail with me before I leave, and I'll take you to Florida.
Making a name for myself in these islands should impress Lizzie. I'll have to find ways to improve my reputation.
I'm at the blow.
The main way Morgan improves his reputation is just by killing the natives on the island. So, did I mention this game was made in 2005? Once you get to Florida and defeat the Spanish and the Ottomans that were there, you learn that Elim, your main boss, is actually part of the Circle.
If you kill me, there will be no one to stop the Circle of Ossus.
There's actually some really compelling evidence for this. Listen to what Elim says to the Incan man.
Morgan, why is that savage still alive?
The Inca prisoners helped us against the Spanish.
With that bit of evidence, it should be obvious that Elim is actually part of the Circle and wants to use the fountain for nefarious purposes. So, yeah, we team up with the Ottomans and Lizzie to defeat the Circle.
See the men with Alain. They are Bonga, the Circle's elite soldiers.
This is Knight's business now. Elaine made me a pawn in this Circle's game. He's betrayed the Knights of St. John, and he'll answer for it.
If you want revenge, keep him from getting his prize, the fountain's water.
What are you saying?
Destroy it. It is the only way.
From here, you just destroy the fountain using fire ships. So after destroying the Fountain of Youth,
Oh my god!
Salim and Lizzie just head on their separate ways. One important story detail is the fact that Morgan actually takes a sip from the lake that has the fountain's water in it. I won't elaborate further. So now we got 2 more acts to go. In Act 2, you're John Black, and you're friends with this Iroquois warrior named Kaneem. The inciting incident is a bunch of native tribes attack your settlement. The main antagonist for Act 2 is Warwick, a British officer. Act 2 also tries to introduce this romance plot, but it's not very compelling.
I missed you, John.
Have you told your brother about us yet?
Later, when it is a quieter time, he will accept it. But not now.
The French are moving against the British. Your people will be caught.
In Act 2, they also try to introduce some more historical characters.
Are you John Black?
You may recognize a few of them.
I'm Colonel Washington.
Why are your mercenaries
You go into the Rocky Mountains and then you find out that the Russians are invading.
Those soldiers, they're Russian.
The campaign uses spectacle to help keep these scenario battles interesting, and it succeeds in some ways, and in other ways it just doesn't work. Mostly due to how nonsensical some of the characters' actions are. John's gonna try and take down the mountain to destroy the Russian army, but he gets ambushed by Warwick and the Circle members.
Warwick.
With the ambush on the mountain, it might be extremely difficult to detonate the dynamite. Luckily, John knows the technique of instant transmission, so he's able to detonate the dynamite. And with that, all the Russian forces are dead, and the colonies are saved. Now the king gives birth to John's son, and he's the father of the character we play in Act 3. In Act 3, you play Amelia with Cooper, and the relationship isn't really fleshed out, but it's interesting nonetheless.
Then you can go back to fighting Mexicans or Seminoles or whatever it is you do.
From here, Amelia meets the main antagonist for Act 3. It's Behemoth. He's a real charmer, especially with the second line that he ever has said to this woman.
Do I know you, friend?
Pierre Beaumont is what I'm called. The Mexican army chased me all the way up here. And now, we are trapped together, no? I will show you the way I like to kill. These days you have not enough money, eh? So now I help you. With gold from my claim up in the mountains.
When Amelia and Behemoth go back up to the mountain, Camion is reintroduced in the story from Act 2, and just reveals the fact that Behemoth is actually the leader of the Circle. And from there, just more hijinks ensue. From there, the duo chase down Behemoth all the way to the Caribbean, where the final mission takes place. The final battle is actually pretty cool. Although, for my playthrough, the AI army actually brought more cannons than I did to finish off the Circle. So, a little bit of an undercut, especially because I was playing the campaign on hard all the way through. From here, Amelia kills Beaumont, and that's the end of the Circle. And with that, that ends the main campaign. I would say that overall the campaign was pretty good as an introduction to many of the game's mechanics that exist in skirmish and multiplayer. Although I do have to say that a lot of the characters aren't interesting and the main conflict isn't too compelling, all of the interesting part of the story takes place in Act 1, and the Circle isn't really threatening as an antagonist, and you basically hand them 3 big fat L's in every act of the campaign. Some of the spectacle stuff that you do, like destroying the Russian army, fighting over the Fountain of Youth, and even assaulting the Circle's fortress, is actually pretty fun. I did leave out a lot of details and story beats, so if you do decide to play the campaign, I suggest playing it on hard all the way through, and as soon as you get the chance to, purchase the mortar cards from the home city. It'll make your life a lot easier. It should be important to note that I haven't played Fire and Shadow or the Asian Dynasties, so if their content is hype enough, I might make a part 2. Now that we've tackled the first campaign, we can talk about the main reason why most people play Age of Empires 3. It's for the skirmish and multiplayer. We need to lay some groundwork before we even go into multiplayer/skirmish. So for every civilization, they actually have a deck that they're able to use. A civilization's deck can include things such as units, resources, specific boosts to resource gathering, or enhance unit values. There's also faction-specific cards that specifically enhance a certain aspect of your civilization. For example, the main faction that I like to play is the Dutch, and they have a card that is called Bank of Rotterdam and Bank of Amsterdam that allows for an additional bank to be added to the build limit. Banks are buildings unique to the Dutch that allows them to generate gold passively, and with a max build limit increasing from 5 to, I believe the max is 9, resulting in a ludicrous amount of gold being generated every second. I will say, typically, I play European factions, but for this review, I actually decided to branch out and play the Indians, and also the Indians, and both of their playstyles are pretty unique and different. I'll give a very brief overview of some of their mechanics. We'll start with India. So India actually has a really interesting faction mechanic, where after building a consulate, they can actually choose a foreign ally and they get buffs, specific units, and shipments related to the faction that they chose to ally with. It's a really engaging system because you're always managing your export, which is generated passively by your villagers gathering resources. And overall, it's just a really cool system that allows for a lot of variety in the same faction. Also, whenever you age up, instead of the typical just selecting it from the town center, you actually get to build a building, which has a unique buff. It's really different and pretty cool from how we typically do age increases in other factions. Because the faction's India, there's actually a very interesting mechanic with the cows. In other factions, typically they're just an easy source of food. But in India, you can actually build a sacred field to build the cows and then have the cows work the sacred field for experience, which is really unique to this specific faction because there's not a lot of other factions who generate experience in the same way. In this game specifically, I'd like to highlight an issue with the AI related to the cows. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So I think here, the AI is trying to capture the cows, but they can't. So instead of trying to kill any of my settlers or do anything else, they just keep retrying to capture the cows. For me, the baseline difficulty is moderate. Anything lower in the AI will become brain dead. I did not mention this in the campaign section, but there was actually a mission where you're fighting Circle and Russians, and the Russians decided to rush my base with a bunch of settlers. Obviously trying to go around and get some resources, but I think it alludes to one of the issues with the AI. Pathfinding can also sometimes be an issue, or there's certain quirks, but it doesn't come up too often. Of course, a lot of games also have similar issues, so it's not too big of a deal. Just try to enjoy the game as it is. Even with these issues, it can still be pretty fun. Especially when you get into some multiplayer hijinks.
Stop stealing my yaks, you fucking yakety yak!
Fuck you, these are my yaks now, fuck off!
Now we come to one of the great questions of RTSs. Is it okay to murder settlers in the name of winning? It's a difficult question, because on one hand, they're helping our enemy's efforts, therefore they should be targeted to weaken our enemy. However, on the other hand, they're also just innocent bystanders just trying to make a living for themselves. I was not able to come to a satisfactory conclusion, so I asked Brute Force what he thought on the situation. I got some pretty good insight. One thing he said is never turn down free XP, which is very true. Another thing he said too, it's really their fault if they get in the way. So, you know. He also told me that the Geneva Convention doesn't really apply. I didn't even mention the fact that the game takes place before World War II, but you know. I still wanted more insight, so I decided to watch some of his videos on Boyz Entertainment. The videos are very insightful to how conduct in war should be done, and I've learned a lot, and I've finally come to a conclusion. And you know what? Call me controversial, but I think he's absolutely right. Sorry about that. Got a little carried away. Play Age of Empires 3. Or don't. It's up to you, really. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The next video from me will not be the Warhammer 3 video. Thank you. Thank you so much for all the support on the recent videos. It's been such an encouragement for us to deliver high-quality content that you'll enjoy. And we look forward to delivering more high-quality content to you in the future. Well, you know what they say, the Tree of Liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. And as always, thanks for watching. You may kill me, but you'll never destroy my freedom!